Elia Meltzer, no relation to David Meltzer. Elia, her story is basically a testament to the fact that everybody needs to pay more attention to their kids and what they're doing when they're alone. And especially with all the influence of social media, I mean, we just have no idea sometimes what our kids are being involved in. She is a diehard mental health advocate. Welcome to the stage, Elia.
Thank you for having me. So I always with having poor self-esteem most of my life, I always tend to compare myself to others. And my age is one thing that kind of sticks out in my mind. I'm the youngest person here, and that's okay. But then you're probably wondering, what can a 23-year-old teach me that I don't already know? What could you have possibly gone through in your 23 short years of life that I don't already know? And unfortunately, I've been through a lot, as Jason kind of alluded to. So my mental health journey started at the age of 11. So I was in 6th grade, and that's when I first started having suicidal thoughts. So before I ever experienced depression, before I ever experienced a panic attack, I wanted to leave the earth. And unfortunately, the reason why I had those negative thoughts is because of intense and severe bullying, to the point where now that I look back on it, I probably could have taken him to court for harassment and battery, but I was 11 and I didn't know better, and I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid it was going to get worse. And so 11-year-old me between 6th grade and 7th grade wanted to die after a year of having bruises on my body from this narcissistic kid who had pleasure in watching me wince and twitch, and not a pleasant experience. I didn't die. Obviously, I'm still here. And how that happened, I don't know. I probably should have, and it didn't happen. Around that time, I started having nightmares. I started having nightmares about being raped. I started having nightmares about being molested. At that point in time, neither had actually happened to me, but I started having these very vivid dreams. So that started my journey with PTSD. Why it happened? I don't know. It just did. And while in middle school, things kind of took a turn for the worse with my nightmares. Things took a turn for the worse with bullying. Things took a turn for the worse with my self-esteem. It took me 11 years to rebuild my self-esteem. And that is a testament to the power of bullying, to the power of negativity in life. Because I had no self-esteem, I had no body sense of worth, body image, anything like that for over a decade. In high school, I went from private school to public school, and it didn't get better at all. That's when I truly started experiencing symptoms of depression. I would cry for no reason. I'd have panic attacks, although I didn't know that they were panic attacks at the time. I would wake up screaming into my pillow, or silent screaming, where you're screaming but no words come out, no sounds come out. And I started cutting myself. And something that I feel like people don't understand about self-harm is that as a child, I was so numb, I was so lethargic that I wanted to feel something. And physical pain is much easier to deal with than emotional pain. So I decided to hurt myself, although I didn't see it in that way at that time. And so I ended up carving numbers into my arm because a lot of the nightmares that I was having related to the Holocaust. And so I was experiencing a lot of trauma that realistically I shouldn't have experienced. Kids are creative, and I don't think adults understand how creative they are. All of the belts were locked up. All the knives were locked up. All of the lanyards, all of the ties, all of the lanyards that kids would use to have their keys. around their neck. All of the blinds were taken down because blinds have the strings to open and close. Yeah, they were taken down. All of the razor blades were taken down, except my dad once forgot that he had one in his like to-go toiletry bag, and I found it. That didn't end well. I did research online about apple seeds and arsenic. Turns out you need to eat like 30 apples in order to like get any sort of like negative effects from apple seeds. I didn't know that until I was like 2 apples in. Fail attempt. Don't do it. I looked up like wild plants and like naturally occurring arsenic and like what can kill you. And apparently here in Ohio, there's a lot. And why I didn't go to the hospital, I don't know. But here we are. Like I tried eating different things in like the springtime that were growing that can make like horses sick, and I didn't get sick, and I don't understand why. And that's why I believe in God, because I should be to the hospital and I'm just not. So kids are very creative. Are they as creative as me? I don't know. I can't attest for all kids. But I was, and it wasn't a good time for my parents. Like lock and key supervision. At the age of 17, I experienced something that a lot of people would consider to be horrific. I didn't understand what was happening at the time. I was on Facebook. And this is why you need to be very careful of kids online, because adults can be very creepy. And I ended up in communication with 2 individuals who I now know were suspected of being human traffickers, and they were grooming me online. So 16-year-old self being groomed by suspected human traffickers, sense of self was already down the drain because of 11-year-old bullying. It was not a good time, to say the least. So all of these things accumulated into my mental health, where at the age of 17, so this is the end of my junior year, I was in Akron Children's Psychiatric Unit for 10 days. And I accused them of brainwashing children into being happy. Because my perspective was, the world is so messed up, why would you want to be happy? Right? Because at this point in time, Paris had been bombed by terrorists. My aunt nearly died. The civil war in Syria had children plastered all over the news with missing body parts and like pieces of glass in their brain. And being a teenager, I wasn't having any of it. There was no point in living. The world sucked. Why would you want me to be happy? So I accused them of brainwashing kids, and they did not take kindly to that, to say the least. I ended up being in Akron Children's in the psychiatric unit several times as a high school student, and eventually found the right doctors, eventually found the right medication, because obviously my brain was misfiring. I didn't have the right chemicals in my brain, and I was seeing the world through obviously not rose tinted glasses. I would consider them red tinted glasses. Everything was drenched in blood and guts, like not worth seeing. And then I went to university. And through my course of university, I discovered a few things about myself and the world. Mental health for children is like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. A lot of medicines aren't meant for children. And it's like doctors are crossing their fingers, hoping that it helps, but it's not the right solution. And they're not actually getting better because you only have like 2 or 3 medications, when medication number like 6 or 7 is actually the one that's going to help you. I'm lucky that I survived my Band-Aid bullet hole treatment. I also discovered that there are 2 types of doctors. There are the doctors that know their stuff. And then there are what I call unicorn doctors, where it's like music and walk in the parks will cure you. That doesn't help with PTSD. That doesn't help with suicidal thoughts, as I've discovered. There's a right way of treatment, there's a wrong way of treatment. And if it helps for someone, great. But I'm lucky that I survived. And the conclusion that I came across is that I didn't have the right language to talk about mental health. I pretended that I was fine. I masked very well. Most people have no idea what I went through while being an adolescent. I didn't have the words to communicate how often I was feeling suicidal, how often I was having those negative thoughts, how often I was experiencing panic attacks. And if you cannot communicate these things, then how are you supposed to be treated? Mental health is like math. If you put garbage in, you get garbage out. The solution doesn't work, and you're left with a big X on your test, and you have to figure out what went wrong and take another test. So I made a business. I made a product and then I made a business because I know that I'm not the only one. And I know that I'm not the only child. I know I'm not the only adult with said story, with said problems, where you don't have the language to communicate what's going on. And even if you did, where do you even start? While in class, I realized that trying to take emotions and then turning them into data is very difficult, right? Turning vague blob concepts into physical, tangible things is very difficult. So I started tracking my symptoms. How often am I experiencing these things? How often do I have suicidal thoughts? Is it once a month? Is it once a week? Is it every day? How often do I have panic attacks? How often do I have negative self-talk? And by comparing different things, I was able to come up with several diagnoses. I wasn't diagnosed with PTSD until I was 18 years old. I wasn't diagnosed with something called PMDD until I was 21. For those of you who don't know, PMDD is like PMS, but worse. Basic for me personally, like when you go on your cycle, your body stops producing estrogen, which meant that my brain stopped producing dopamine. So all of the feelings of mental health would suddenly intensify because the chemical changes were linked together. Luckily, I didn't experience any form of psychosis, which is common with PMDD. So it wasn't as bad as it could be, but I didn't know I had it. How do you treat something if you can't communicate that there's a problem? So by tracking my mental health, by tracking my symptoms, I was able to create a very concise, clear picture of what was going on in my life. I was also able to see whether or not my medication was in fact working. I could see a very clear before and after of how often I was experiencing symptoms and seeing whether or not it was acceptable. Like, is it actually helping me or is it not? I started doing this for myself in the form of bullet journaling, like just doing my own little journal. And my peers in university saw what I was doing and basically said, I wish I had time for that, but I don't because I'm a university student or I am working. I'm no longer a student. I'm in the working world. I don't have time for that. So I sat down with a few fellow students and I created a pre-made version of the journal, which at one point in time was called the Chartam Planner, and that has now changed to True Self-Care. So I created True Self-Care because I discovered that mental health, there's two key components: awareness and communication. If you don't know that something is going on, you can't talk about it, and your doctors can't help you. And if you do understand that it's going on, but you don't know how to talk about it, your doctor still can't help you, which means you're still stuck with the problem. And so the planner that I created helps you understand that, is there a problem and how often does it happen, so that you can talk about it with your doctors. And the idea is that you're discovering your true self. You're discovering who you are. You're discovering how to become the better version of yourself. Because let's face it, 16-year-old me in the hospital with cuts everywhere and everything locked up so I wouldn't try to hurt myself was not the best version of myself. There's definitely a better version of Elia Meltzer where I don't have to be under 24-hour supervision because I'm a complete mess. I'm still discovering the best version of myself, right? That's an ongoing process. But the idea of true self-care is that we're survivors. We've gone through unfortunate circumstances, and we're discovering how those circumstances can make us better, how they can help us turn into the people that we were always meant to be. And with everyone here, everyone whose stories have been shared today, you guys are discovering your true selves. You guys have gone through unfortunate circumstances in your own way, right? Everyone has a different story. And you're discovering how you turn those negative circumstances into a better version of yourself, so that way you are empowering yourself to be better, to be whatever better looks like for you, whether it's free or successful or independent or happy or a combination of the above. So now I'm 23 years old. I've been through a lot of unfortunate circumstances. And those are my two conclusions about mental health. So talk to your kids, because they might be assholes because they're teenagers and hormones suck. But you need to talk to them. Thank you.